Hi, I'm Johnny Marques, and welcome to the All Knowing Podcast. We all have people we admire, heroes, people we look up to, people we try to emulate. At the All Knowing, we look into people's personalities by using different systems such as numerology, astrology, and life charts. A deep dive in a persona, if you will. It is our hope that we can help break down what makes a person, who they are, their traits, their actions, and their possible beliefs. And in doing so, help you understand if you have similar virtues. Thank you for watching and enjoy the show. Hey there, I'm Johnny Marques, and welcome to another episode of the All Knowing Podcast. Tonight, we wanted to do a figure somewhat in the past. He's one of the most iconic figures of all time. And with a movie just recently coming out, we decided, hey, what the hell, why not? Born Elvis Aaron Presley, January 8th, 1935 in Tupelo, Mississippi at 4:35 p.m. He went on to be one of the greatest stars, an icon till this day. I mean, even making movies about it so many years later. Let's see, he had a twin, which a lot of people don't know. And in 1953, he was one of the only members in his family to get a diploma. In 1954, imagine this, he had his first hit, and that was 1 year out of high school. Another fun fact that I realized is that at the age of 22, he bought Graceland for somewhere a little north of $100,000. So back then, that was a small fortune. So basically, love to get into it with Joseph. Hey, Joseph, how are you?
Real good. Real good. Thank you very much, Johnny.
Great. So what did you come up with? I already said the dates and the time and all that stuff. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I got his chart in my head right now, his astrology chart. Capricorn, Sagittarius rising, moon in Pisces. Small town boy makes good. In fact, he was less than a small town boy. He was way down. You know, he was born in a 2-room shack that his father had built called a shotgun house. And he was always very poor. And his father, for example, was thrown in jail briefly for forging a check for rent. Elvis is the classic American dream come true. Capricorn is the hardest working sign of the zodiac. You got people that start at the bottom and work their way to the top because it's like a mountain goat or mountain climber. And so he was always really into his own thing. He was an introvert gone extrovert. You see that in his face, if you know face reading, because his eyes are inset, recessed, which is typical of introverts. And he was shy as a boy. There's no inkling at all that he had musical talent or any kind of talent. They bought him a guitar when he was a little kid. He really wanted a play rifle or something, but he gradually learned how to play it and he had an aptitude towards it. He grew up in a black neighborhood, started out in Tupelo, Mississippi, ended up in Memphis, Tennessee, in a black neighborhood. And he, tried to gain popularity by playing his guitar. He was born old, getting younger in reverse. That's typical also of Capricorn. And Capricorns are often represented in the blues because Capricorns are down. They're very serious people. You would see a lot of great blues artists are Capricorn. Sade, I'm looking at my list here. Shirley Bassey, Odetta, Rod Stewart, Marianne Faithfull, Kid Rock, Ethel Merman, who's a belter. A lot of them are belters, like Shirley Bassey, Pat Benatar, Aaliyah, Jared Leto, Jade I like because she's so down, she's streetwise. They generally are streetwise. Uh, Elvis grew up in a very underprivileged environment. And so his ticket to success was the guitar, and he wrote it in style. He again and again was repudiated. In eighth grade, because Capricorns, they're used to resistance, and that's how they get strong. It's the strongest sign of the zodiac. Capricorn is stronger than all the other signs put together. I mean, you're looking at J. Edgar Hoover, Al Capone, Richard Nixon, Joseph Stalin, Howard Hughes. They often are billionaires. Aristotle Onassis. So he was told in eighth grade, he got a C in music, and he was told he had no aptitude for singing. When he started to break it, and do local clubs and do some local TV and radio, again and again, people told him he was like, had no talent, he wasn't going to get anywhere. His style of music was kind of old or passe, because he was rockabilly. In other words, part country western, part black, kind of hillbilly music. He was called white trash, always put down, always limited by the lack of awareness in his environment. In fact, gangs of youth would pelt him with rocks at concerts because they grew up during the swing era. Frank Sinatra said that he was how did he put it again? Just a terrible person, a degenerate, that his music was degenerate. This is what Frank Sinatra said. And
so at 22, he has his first hit. I'm thinking nowadays, and I'm thinking when I was 22, I mean, where does that come from?
Well, it came from two things. One, his innate talent and his love of music, his fact that he loved black music. He would listen to the black radio stations a lot and see the black performers a lot. Everybody knows he was influenced tremendously by Bo Diddley, and also probably by Little Richard and Chuck Berry. But even more, he was, he loved gospel. And there was a tremendous soulful energy. This comes with his moon in Pisces. The moon relates to the emotional subconscious nature. And he had moon in Pisces, which shows a couple of things. One, tremendous love for his mother, and tremendous love of woman, and tremendous love of beauty. I mean, this guy would kiss all the audience members who lined up at his concerts, all the females. He was also considered kind of a homoerotic icon. Not that he was gay, because he wasn't, but just because he mixed masculine swagger with feminine glamour. The Capricorn is a goat with a fish's tail. That's its symbol. What does that mean? Well, the goat from the waist up is uptight, serious, like bah humbug, very formal, very straight, very square. But from the waist down, he was the pelvis. He was wild. He didn't even know
that was his nickname, wasn't it? Elvis the Pelvis?
Yeah, Elvis the Pelvis. And that was part of the way they tried to deride him, the critics, the music critics, the professionals, because he was starting a whole new sound. Sam Phillips, the CEO of Sun Records, which was the major label for that kind of music, or where that kind of music was going, said that if he could find a white singer who could sing like a black man, he'd make $1 billion. And that's pretty much what happened. Although once again, Elvis tried out for Sun Records, he auditioned, and they said he couldn't sing well enough, or that his music wasn't right, or both. So it's pretty crazy. Later on, of course, Sun Records made him a star. Colonel Tom Parker, who was a kind of a carnival con man, Cancerian, born in the year of the rooster in Oriental astrology, Cancer like P.T. Barnum. Colonel Tom Parker got a hold of Elvis, and the rest was history. Of course, he was a bit of a con man. He took 50% of Elvis's profits. Can you imagine that? A manager getting 50% of his star's profits. But at any rate, Colonel Parker managed to produce him with Heartbreak Hotel, which was his first big hit. Isn't it interesting? Heartbreak Hotel, kind of the story of Elvis in some ways, you know, going to the top, a fancy hotel, but there's a heartbreak attached to it. And Elvis had a few heartbreaks along the path, but that's Capricorn, the goat that climbed the mountain goat that climbs the top of the mountain. At any rate, once he made it to the Ed Sullivan show, and they, as you probably know, they didn't even show Elvis from the waist down because he was just too salacious, too sexy. And Elvis came around when Pluto left the sign Leo, entered the sign Virgo. 1956 is when he hit. And that's when, so he introduced a whole new epoch in American entertainment. He de-virginized America. Pluto's the planet of sexuality, and Virgo is the virgin. So he de-virginized. Ever since 1956, you started having wild rock and roll, sexual, passionate music that completely grabbed the center of attention in American culture. And Elvis was the king. He was the guy who did it all. And the goat with the fish's tail, you know, he put rose oil and Vaseline, believe it or not, in his hair to style it when he was a kid. And so it was kind of lacquered look, very kind of cool and perfect. But then from the waist
They're
down,
saying they're saying he put black shoe polish in his hair.
I didn't know that, but I wouldn't.
Yeah, black
Yeah.
shoe polish in his hair.
Yeah.
And just to catch up with you, previously, there was a competitor of the Ed Sullivan show I read, and they hired him for 2 shows, 50 grand a piece. And what I read is that back during those times, the TV network and television, that they considered that 80% of household was watching Elvis Presley on this show. That's insane.
He became the most popular entertainer in history. He recorded and released 500 million to 1 billion records. That's amazing, unbelievable. He won more gold records and platinum albums and honorific titles. He even was he won the Presidential Medal of Freedom when he cozied up to Richard Nixon. We'll talk about that. But his interesting thing about him, he was kind of wild and crazy, but he was also really square. He was the guy next door. He was soft-spoken, thoughtful, conscientious, respectful, generally. You know, he was born in the year of the dog, which is like 1934, 1946, 1958, 1970, 1982, 1994, 2006, 2018 are years of the dog. If you're a year of the dog, you know what I'm saying. You tend to be totally honorable, totally high-minded, group consciousness. He was corporate bankable even before people realized that there was something beyond his wildness. He had Sagittarius rising, which is a wild kind of sign. And he did have a wild side. He definitely, you know, liked the ladies, he liked to party. He had the Memphis Mafia, which is like his gang, you know, that would hang around with him at Graceland. But he was Year of the Dog, so he was very responsible. And Year of the Dog, they can be very popular in the world, more presidents than any other sign. You also have some rock stars like Madonna, Michael Jackson, Prince, and of course Elvis Presley. So you can see that he was all American. And all the girls fell in love with him. Eventually, all the guys wanted to be like him. I remember when I was a kid, which kind of dates me, in the 50s, everybody wanted to be Elvis Presley. Everybody combed their hair like that. Everybody would watch his movies, which were pretty uniformly terrible, you know, very boring. He couldn't act to save his life, really. He was so wooden, which is kind of typical of Capricorns like Kevin Costner.
I think he had one good film. So
Which one did you like?
King Creole.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I
It
think
was
he
more
did a
down
gr-
and
yeah,
authentic and
I
nitty
think he did
gritty.
a decent job in King Creole. Or Kid Creole or King Creole? What was it?
I think it was King Creole.
King
Yeah,
Creole.
yeah.
And which one of his hit songs came out of, but apparently that's the route he wanted to take, but Colonel Parker didn't allow him to be that serious actor. Is that true?
Yeah, I gather that Tom Parker did have tremendous control over him, and he did not have his best creative interests at heart. Elvis Presley, with the right director, could have been a fine actor. Almost anybody could be a good actor with the right director. But you know, he was wooden, and he was safe. It's funny. He was a total wild rebel, juvenile delinquent role model when he was really hot, and he was great when he came out. He could sing not only wild, passionate rock and roll, like "You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog," but he could also sing really tender ballads like "Love Me Tender," just that would melt your heart. And he was a great singer. There's no question. His voice
Yeah.
was terrific, and
The
he had a
gospel,
great. Uh-huh.
also with the gospel and
Yeah,
blues, it
yeah.
almost seemed like there wasn't any genre that he didn't touch, that he wasn't successful or had a hit
Yeah,
with.
yeah.
So
He
that's
didn't go
fascinating.
as pop as, for example, Frank Sinatra did. He did somewhat, but he was great in rock and roll and the blues, and ballads. Just incredibly beautiful. That was the moon in Pisces. Moon in Pisces is very beautiful. Pisces is a very beautiful sign. You look at Elizabeth Taylor and Nancy Wilson and so many. They all kind of beautiful watery eyes, which he had. And so the Capricorn is more like tough, like Annie Lennox, one of my favorite Capricorn singers, a belter, Ethel Merman, Sade, but particularly Annie Lennox is a very classic Capricorn singer because she really belts it out. She's strong, like Ethel Merman. A lot of probably our viewers don't know who Ethel Merman was. She sang, "There's no business like show business," and it was so powerful. Jack Parr introduced her one time, said, "You don't even need the TV set, just open your window, you'll hear her." So Elvis Presley could be very impactful, like Jailhouse Blues, and a great, great dancer. That the pelvis just really rock and roll. So he earned every penny that he earned, and he was very generous, which is typical of Sagittarius rising. He gave away Cadillacs to people just that he met, like at a car lot. He gave one Cadillac to a black lady. He just met her at the car lot, never met her before. And so he was just this wild and Sagittarius is very generous, very exciting. His rising sign, Sagittarius, and is very commonly associated with rock and roll. Keith Richards, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, some of them who died young, as Elvis did. People like that, they burn out quickly. Elvis took a lot of drugs. He actually OD'd on barbiturates several times. Once he was in a 3-day coma before he died.
Let me ask you this: where does before we move on to other subjects, where's that generosity coming from?
Well, where does anything come from? It's karmic. It's from his past lives. That's what most astrologers would tell you. But it's particularly true of his Sagittarius rising, which is ruled by the planet Jupiter, which tends to be very generous.
So Sagittarius tend to be very generous?
Sagittarius risings and Sagittarians in general tend to be very generous. I'm looking at his chart briefly. Neptune at the top of the sky, Mars and Libra, square his sun. His Mars and Libra made him very friendly. I mean, he always had bodyguards, but he would mix with people constantly and sign autographs. He was completely unaffected because he was the guy next door. In the tarot, he's called the 6 of spades. 6 is a workaday number. Spades is the suit of wisdom and labor. So he was very down to earth. He was a truck driver before he was a rock star. And he never lost his taste for, he used to eat fried peanut butter and banana sandwiches. Can you imagine that? And he was just a very square kind of guy at heart. In fact, he cozied up to another Capricorn, Richard Nixon, back in the late 60s or early 70s. And he said that he wanted to be a undercover police officer to help catch drug dealers. This was no doubt influenced by the fact that he was very frustrated that the Beatles had eclipsed him as the #1 music draw of all time. He had actually hung out with the Beatles and had a good time with them, for like a 3-hour get together. But then he started putting them down as being degenerate or whatever, just the same way he was accused of being when he was younger. And, so he ended up wanting to be a narc for Nixon. And he wanted a badge, wanted a gun, wanted wanted the whole rigmarole. But Nixon didn't quite know how to take him. He was a little too crazy for Nixon. I channeled Richard Nixon once. Man, what a square. Whew. But, Capricorns can be very square, very, anyway, so go ahead.
They were saying that he didn't like to be alone. What's up with that?
He was an introvert gone extrovert. He was an introvert as a child. He was very lonely as a child. He had no friends. He was square. He was called, once again, thought of as white trash. And he was raised up in a mostly Black neighborhood. So he didn't really know how to connect to people. But he's one of those rare people. I'm one of them myself, introvert gone extrovert. Generally, we change during our teenage years. It was the guitar that changed his life. It was his music. Because, originally they put him down for his music. But what happened was eventually it caught favor even while he was, say, 17, 18, 19, 20. And then he started gigging. And of course, the girls dug that. So he became very popular. But he never forgot lonely people. He never forgot what it was like to be lonely. In fact, some of his songs are beautifully about loneliness, like Heartbreak Hotel. You'll be so lonely, baby. You'll be so lonely. You will die. I mean, he spoke from personal experience, in that. So he touched people. He was a soul man. And, even the African-American singers that he imitated, some of them respected that because he had soul. He was deeply emotionally expressive human being. And he was very professional in his music. He was actually in my opinion, one of the top 2 great American entertainers of all time, the other being Sammy Davis Jr. These 2 people could entertain an arena with their jokes, with their friendliness, with their patter, with their movement, with their karate moves that Elvis started learning, that he incorporated into his act, with his jumpsuits, with his chorus.
It seemed that going forward, like he evolved with the times. I mean, he wasn't. I mean, where is that coming from? Where, like you just brought up, it seemed that in the beginning it looked like he had like a Western look, and then as he got older, he started with the sequins and the jumpsuits and very like where is that? I mean, I would almost say that's like Leo.
Well, the Black African-American entertainers have been doing that long before him. I mean, look at James Brown. The Black musicians invented rock and roll, and they put it on the map. And then the white guys came along, like the Rolling Stones, who learned a lot about stage choreography from watching Tina Turner and Ike and Tina Turner. So on one level, it came from the African-American tradition of put it all out there. If you got it, flaunt it. But he loved Black music and he loved Black musicians, and so he learned from that, and he became really colorfully, really expressive, and he put on a one-man show. He was the greatest rock star who ever lived, the greatest individual rock star who ever lived. He burned out quick, because music is the hardest profession to make a living at, not only because of the challenges and the competition, but because of the emotion that you have to channel at any given moment, 2 or 3 shows a night. It kills people. A lot of junkies, particularly in jazz musicians. I mean, because they also were not recognized for their genius. It's frustrating. So rock stars often die young, and often they're Sagittarius or Sagittarius influenced because they're like a fiery arrow. Like Sagittarius is the centaur with the fiery arrows, and they burn out like a fiery arrow. Sagittarius rules the electric guitar. It's like a bow and arrow in a sense. It sends out lightning flashes. Jimi Hendrix, of course, being one of the greatest, in some ways, fiery archer of electric, passion who ever lived, along with another Sagittarius, Keith Richards, Dickie Betts, so many. And Capricorn is also of the blues. Janis Joplin died young because she knew pain. She knew loneliness. She was also an introvert when she was a child, was considered ugly, an ugly duckling, and not popular at all. So out of that, she overachieved and became one of the most popular cultural icons of her generation. But you see, to keep that fire going all the time, to be a rock star all the time, it's a full-time job. And the drugs kind of help you to get up and come down. Elvis Presley started taking amphetamines in the military service, which he was honorable enough not to try to get out of, because he was kind of square. In 1958, he was I believe, a tank intelligence officer. And he was completely responsible, filled his tour of duty, didn't ask for any special favors. His mother died while he was in the service.
One thing I heard was that a large part of that was for his image. So all his doubters, they wanted him to see him, instead of as a playboy, as a guy who was a true American who did his duty. So
yeah, but I don't buy that totally, because because I'm a psychic. I know Elvis Presley like I'm inside him. That's what I do. I channel, actually, a lot of I could channel Elvis. And so I resonate with Elvis. Elvis was a man of principle. He loved America. He was a true patriot. I'll tell you another guy who was drafted or draftable was Frank Sinatra. He arranged to have a doctor give him flat feet, or certification for flat feet. He got out of the military or out of the draft, and he made a lot of money entertaining those girls back home. So
right.
That's the difference between Elvis Presley and Frank Sinatra, who I admire.
But they let him out early as well. He was only in for 2 years. They let him out to finish up Kid Creole. This is what I read.
Yeah. Well, nobody's one thing or another.
Right.
He did go in the military. He lost how many millions, and how many millions of dollars did America lose in taxable income?
Right.
And 1958 was the Cold War. We wanted to prove to the Russians that they couldn't fight us or out Sputnik us or whatever they were doing. And but whatever. I mean, Elvis Presley was square and hip. And the greatest entertainers are square and hip. They're not just hip. I mean, Marilyn Manson is hip. How well does he stack up to Elvis Presley in terms of, icon status?
Right.
But he's not square. And then you got Pat Boone was square, but not hip. And how does he stack up compared to Little Richard, who he stole from, Tutti Frutti, the song? Can you imagine?
But going towards the end of his life, I almost get a feeling that like he was bored.
He was.
Yeah.
He was bored. He was disappointed. He went from being a shy boy to a rock and roll icon, superstar, no bigger star in history, to being in the shadow of the Beatles and of all those, English invasion bands and long hair bands. He died in 1977. I mean, he was even eclipsed by disco, So, he lost, and punk. So he just lost out, and all he would do was hang around with the Memphis Mafia, drinking, carrying on, eating too much. He got fat. He became a bloated caricature of himself.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to befriend one of the Mafia guys, Jerry Schilling. And I remember one time he moved back to Memphis, and he said, "Go look in my truck, kid, before I go." And I went in the back of the truck, and it was a bunch of gold records from Elvis Presley, Elvis memorabilia.
Yeah.
So he said nothing but good things about Elvis.
Yeah.
Said he was a good man. He was a kind man. And another funny story. When I was young, they used to tell me I looked like Elvis Presley as well. And when I came to California, they did a TV movie on Elvis Presley, and I got 3 auditions in and forward for the role, and they ended up giving it to Jonathan Rhys Meyers. It was for
Bummer.
CBS.
Bummer.
So interesting. a little bit of
what looks in your face like Elvis. Elvis has a combination face in Chinese face reading. It's rectangular, but also upside down triangle. And you got the same thing, okay? And you know, his cheekbones were a little big in proportion to his face than yours. And that's very Capricornian, rules the bones and the skeleton. They often have prominent cheekbones, you know, like Faye Dunaway, Robert Stack, you know, which makes them tough because the cheekbones are related to aggressive power. Rattlesnakes, for example, this area is very large, you know. And you have the rectangular forehead like Elvis does. You know, he it's funny. He was really smart in some ways. He was like a self-taught, well, genius in some ways. I remember watching a interview with Steve Martin, who had met Elvis, and Elvis, you know, dropped by Steve's dressing room after the show in order to tell him he liked his set. And he showed him his guns, which Elvis carried around as guns. Typical Sagittarius rising. You know, they always like guns. They like fast cars. You know, which Elvis was like a race car driver at part-time. You know, and you know, they like to be on the move. But at any rate, Elvis said he liked Steve Martin's sense of humor because he had the same kind of sense of humor, which was oblique. He used the word oblique. You know, which was subtle. And you see that in Elvis's stage performance. He always has kind of like slightly cynical, sarcastic commentary, which is cute and funny and likable, but still a little bit sarcastic. And that's Capricorn. They tend to be kind of cynical, you know, like once again, bah, humbug. So Elvis was streetwise naturally, but unaffected. And that's something about Sagittarius rising that they don't, you know, they can mix with anybody, with the rich, with the poor, with and people from any country. So Elvis was universal. Everybody pretty much ended up loving Elvis during his heyday, except of course the jealous punks and fuddy-duddies who kept criticizing him and accusing him of being unintelligent. They didn't realize that he had something that Americans love, heart, tremendous heart. And when he sang his ballads, Love Me Tender, I Saw Her Crying in the Chapel, you know, they were incredibly beautiful. They're angelic. You know, they're as beautiful and soulful as it gets. And then when he sang his rockabilly, you know, like You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog, it's just rabble-rousing and tough and aggressive. So you see not only, and this is true of Sagittarius, I was mentioning Sammy Davis Jr. is a Sagittarius. They're often incredible, the Sagittarius influenced people are incredible entertainers because they'll shoot every fiery arrow at you that they can in order to get a rise out of you. It's like the Walt Disney and his, you know, his theme park. He's a Sagittarius. So that's why sun sign astrology is dangerous. A Capricorn normally is nowhere near like David Bowie or Elvis Presley or Sade. They're not normally wild and bohemian and unusual. They're normally as square as can be. Once again, Richard Nixon, one of the squarest human beings who ever lived. But it's the goat with the fish's tail. You'll find actually, this is a secret now, Capricorn is the most passionate sign in bed. Either that or I've been very lucky. No, just kidding. It's the most passionate sign in bed because they suppress all their emotions. Look at Capricorn like Marlene Dietrich, top hat, tuxedo, than wire net stockings. That's the goat with the fish's tail. So that's their secret. You know, that it's like Oscar Wilde says, women are far luckier than men, far more things are forbidden them. Capricorn is very law-abiding, very uptight. They make great lawyers, business executives. Almost all powerful business executives have strong Capricorn in their whole chart, if you take a look at it, to understand their whole personality rather than just their sun sign. Abraham Lincoln had moon in Capricorn.
So do you think that
Mm-hmm.
you think that he was a legend of his time? It was timing, because yeah, we're seeing big icon, well, kind of icons nowadays, but nothing touches someone like an Elvis Presley, or I don't know.
You're absolutely right. Elvis Presley was a man of his time. That's why he didn't last that well into the 70s. The 70s, everybody was Elvis Presley, you know. In fact, everybody was hipper than Elvis Presley. They had longer hair than he had dared to have. They had more sexual movement than he had dared to have. They had more sexual content to their songs than he dared to have. He was, as Sam Phillips said, the white black man. He was, you know, palatable as the sex symbol of wild rock and roll. Rock and roll music, you know what that stands for, rock and roll, the term rock and roll? Those are the sexual organs. Think about it. Yeah. So, you know, you're rocking and you're rolling, sure. But it's like it takes two, right? So, yeah. You know, it was sex. That was what the rock. And why was it sex? Because 50s was sexless. You had Leave It to Beaver. Well, maybe that's not the best example. You had Father Knows Best. You know, all this square, you know, 50s, post-war, you know, we're the most important country in the world, and we've got the best, we're the most moral country. When I was a kid, you really pledged allegiance to the flag. You really pledged allegiance.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this.
The number one moral country in the world, the goodest country in the world. But then what's opposite of that is rock and roll.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that someone is going to come along and match that? Is going to be as big as Elvis Presley?
Well, we've had, we've had rappers, you know, Jay-Z, you know, every genre has its superstars. I mean, we had the Beatles. I don't see much lately, correct me if I'm wrong, because nowadays corporate business has taken over music to the point where everything's safe. These executives don't want to lose their job by taking a chance. So you got pretty banal music, in my opinion. Although there are going to be a lot of fans out of there who disagree with me, particularly about rap, which I'm not really crazy about. I consider Bob Dylan to be a great rap artist, I forget his name, Luther Von Tronk or Ronk, but at any rate, who's an African American early.
Luther Vandross?
No, I forget his name. It was Von Tronk or something earlier. But at any rate, but it's all banal now. It's all banal. No, name me one great piece of music or great musician in the last 30 years, besides, you know, some people would say rappers. Name one.
You're saying rapper or a singer?
Or a musician. Name one rock star musician who's absolutely fantastic on the same level of the Beatles or Elvis Presley. Okay, there was Prince, but Prince faded, you know, in the 80s. Madonna faded in the 80s. You know, we're entering the Aquarian age now, which is good and bad.
Michael Jackson. I'll say.
Yeah, but he faded in the 80s and 90s, right?
Yeah, but
the last 20 years, tell me anything.
I mean, basically, he had a life that mimicked Elvis Presley. Think about it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So you know what I mean?
And
worldwide,
Madonna, up to a point.
Worldwide, yeah. And then it's
but once again, they were the 80s and 90s. If that,
right, but
they were the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Right, but he still, you know, was still putting out hits, was still doing music, and the drugs took over. Same old. I mean, it seems to be a similar story with all the greatest artists nowadays. That it's almost like a thought that comes to mind. I think you had mentioned this to me the other day, was Icarus
Yeah,
flying close to the sun,
right.
and that sun is the all encompassing success, and they just got too close and they burned out.
Well, not only success, but extremes. The planet Pluto was discovered in 1930. It's plutonium, it's extreme. That's the atom bomb, the mafia, talking movies, all within a decade of the discovery of Pluto. And look at what's going on now in the world. We are facing globalism and anti-globalism. We're facing the destruction of our society and the rebuilding of our society in different forms. And this is
I think
Pluto
things
power.
were a
That's
little
rock and
bit
roll.
more proper back then.
Excuse me?
So, but
What was that?
I think things were a little bit more proper back then.
Well,
You know,
yeah, the whole world is ruled by Taurus. It's the Earth, and that's the opposite sign from Scorpio, which is ruled by Pluto. The first land-dwelling animal was the scorpion, who came out of the sea. They were basically like a lobster. They came out of the sea. They turned their excrement waste product tract into a sting, which would sting you with their excrement, and that would kill you. And then they would duel for the female with their two stings. That's Scorpio. So Scorpio and Taurus go together. Okay, they're opposite from each other. The Taurus age was the age of the Egyptians, where the priests would wear serpents at their third eye. Okay, that's Scorpion, the scorpion or the serpent of Eve. Pluto rules Scorpio, and so we see plutonium is extremely deadly. And we're now in the nuclear age. The nuclear age is the age of the mega hit and the mega catastrophe. Everything's extreme now. That's why people are going crazy. 30% of Americans suffer anxiety.
what do you think Elvis's biggest contribution to the world would be?
Love.
Love.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, he brought black and white together in love, and men and women together in love. And he was passionate with a hound dog, and blue suede shoes. But he was beautiful with love me tender, love me.
Right.
Do
you remember where you were on the day he died?
No, I don't. I remember where I was when John Lennon died.
Okay, we're talking about Elvis though.
But no, Elvis at that point was washed up. Most of the hip people back in the 70s thought he was, a ancient remnant of the old fogey days. We would laugh if anybody was into Elvis.
Really?
Looking back on him now, without that generational affectation, I definitely recognize an incredibly beautiful artist and a great artist. But nobody really cared that much. In fact, they thought, oh, he died of drugs, just desserts for the way he came out against drugs. He's putting down the drugs of the Beatles, and meanwhile, he's taking these pharmaceuticals. And so we thought that was kind of, it wasn't fair. I mean, but we thought, he had it coming, and so not many people really mourned his death in my generation, the hippie generation, the baby boomer generation. But looking back, God, what a tragedy. The man was a great artist. And if he just really stuck with his art and continued to sing his beautiful ballads, I don't know that he was even rock and roll anymore. He was just a beautiful singer, a great, great, beautiful singer.
Yeah. Well, it was a great summation of definitely an icon. And it stands the test of time that, a movie about his life was re-released. I personally think Kurt Russell did I think it was a TV movie, and he nailed him to a T.
Yeah.
Other ones, they were, quite interesting. But it says something that, they just Baz Luhrmann and this new kid, Austin Butler, have this film on it. Now it's being nominated. So going forward, we're going to see if they get any awards out of it. I mean, it would be kind of fascinating if they at least got one or two based on, you know, the subject of Elvis Presley, someone who has been dead and gone for many, many years. So thank you, Joseph. Another
You're very
illuminating
welcome.
report on an icon, Elvis Presley.
Just one additional note. To really do Elvis Presley honor, to really do him tribute, I recommend you listen to some of his ballads and let yourself cry, because that was the beauty of Elvis Presley. Thank you, Johnny.
Great. Thank you for joining us.